Okay, let's follow up on the Morality with Motamedi segment that we did earlier this week. To remind you of the setup came from Josh. Josh said, okay, Lewis is put in charge of making the human population of Earth sustainable. How would you implement a strategy? Would you try to stop new births? Would it be moral to kill people when they reach a certain age to avoid having to stop births? Now, Lewis, to generally characterize your response, you said you would focus on the birth side rather than the death side and work to limit births.
Yes, I thought that that was the most moral angle to tackle this from, and because if not, you have to go out to the other side and resort to killing people, right?
So Chris wrote to me with, so I'll get to some of the specific comments. Chris wrote to me with some general advice for thinking about these morality questions. Chris said, what's important is not what you would do, but why. It's the associated reasoning that we should examine and judge. What you will always find is that two values are in opposition. And when you're considering hypothetical dilemmas, try not to play the role of an administrator if not specified by the story. If you think about this as a public official, it will change your analysis. Really try to figure out the morality of it. And so the two opposing values were limiting birth and how that's different than the state killing people. And certainly, Lewis, the morality of it for you was limiting birth does not have specific victims, although you could argue that there's sort of psychological impact to the potential parents of limiting birth in the way that the state killing people would.
Of course, I think most people would agree with me on that.
So a few comments, one from our Reddit page. One thing that they didn't mention, which I would have liked to hear mentioned, would be the government offering subsidies for those who haven't had children to have vasectomies. A comment from YouTube. I say have a two-child policy because then they're only replacing themselves, and some people will choose not to have children, so it sort of works itself out. Alan wrote, the best way to control population involves the following. Number one, sex education. Number two, free voluntary vasectomies or tubal ligations. Number three, free contraceptives. Number four, minimizing the influence of religion and reproductive and sexual issues. And number five, decriminalizing assisted suicide. Mike wrote in saying no breeding until all children in the system are adopted, then reassess the issue. Very, very interesting take on that.
Yeah.
And another comment from YouTube, mandatory birth control. People who have IQs under 95 would not be allowed to breed. Granted, this would remove a lot of Republicans from the gene pool. And then lastly, Steve writing in saying, I would start with reversing the tax benefits. Instead of tax breaks per child, it would be large tax breaks for the fewest number of children, and then the tax breaks actually go down as you have more children. So sort of a combination of education and subsidized health procedures, which would reduce the birth rate, and also financial incentives. I mean, generally speaking, everybody, with the exception of legalizing assisted suicide, choosing to focus morally on the birth rate rather than the death rate, probably not a surprise.
And these are all good ideas. And I do like the legalization of assisted suicide.
Yeah.
And perhaps you could expand a bit on what certain states already have in terms of that. That's fine. That's good. I was in support of that before anyway. And so, yes, maybe we wouldn't need to kill people or start a war.